Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Paolo Carazza, the director of the Kellogg Institute for International Studies, and I'd like to welcome you all here and share with you my own excitement and enthusiasm for this wonderful event and this extraordinary guest who we have the privilege of honoring today. You're not here to listen to me, and so I won't take any more time other than to say that I'm very pleased to be sharing the stage and introducing my friend and colleague, Father Bob Dow, the director of the Ford Family Program in Human Development Studies and Solidarity, through which this award has been given for a number of years, and Father John will make this introductions from here.
Well, thank you.
Father Bob.
Thank you, Paolo. I also know that you're not here to listen to me either. But thanks, Paolo, and I want to join Paolo in thanking you all for being here and extending a warm welcome to you all. The Ford program was launched in 2008 thanks to a generous gift from Doug and Kathy Ford and their family. And we're really grateful for what their gift has allowed us to do here at the Kellogg Institute for International Studies. The Ford program is dedicated to integrating research, community engagement, and student learning in parts of the world where extreme poverty continues to be a major challenge. The Ford program is dedicated to finding ways to engage communities that are truly empowering and truly leading to outcomes that are sustainable and positive. In addition to Doug and Kathy Ford, several other very generous people have stepped up to turn Notre Dame outward in new ways through the Ford program, and many of them are here today. And on behalf of everyone at the Kellogg Institute and the Ford program and our partners on the ground in Uganda and Kenya, I want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thanks for your generous support of our program. And speaking of support, the Ford program has benefited greatly to the great leadership that has been provided by Father John Jenkins, president of Notre Dame. And so at this point, I'd like to invite Father John up to offer a few remarks. Father John.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks all of you for being here. It's my tremendous pleasure to welcome Jacqueline Novogratz to Notre Dame. We awarded her an honorary degree in 2011, very well deserved, and it's just a delight to welcome her back. And it's particularly exciting for us to have this address part of the Notre Dame Forum on Women in Leadership. She's an exemplary person in that area. Jacqueline's innovative leadership in social investing is remarkable for her success in seeding local enterprises and developing energy, housing, water, and affordable health care to more than 100 million people. But I think there are two dangers when you go out to help people who are in need. And both arise from a certain arrogance. And one is condescension to those who are needy. And the other is the sort of arrogance that imposes solutions on people. I think what is particularly worthy of celebration in Jacqueline's leadership is that she has avoided those dangers in a wonderful way. She said in an interview with the New York Times, I think we so often equate leadership with being experts. The leader is supposed to come in and fix things. The kind of leaders we need reject ideology, reject trite assumptions, reject the status quo, and are really open to listening to solutions from people who are most impacted by the problems. Jacqueline's famous story of the blue sweater taught her how interconnected we are. Her story of the blue bakery in Rwanda, run by 20 unwed mothers, taught her that dignity is more important to the human spirit than wealth. And that's why I'm so pleased and proud to welcome her here to Notre Dame for this award. She strives to make people's lives better, but she does this out of a profound respect for their dignity and as someone who knows that the real gifts in life are not material, but empowerment and community. In short, her work is a genuine act of love. So it's my pleasure to welcome Jacqueline, and I'll ask Bob up to present the award.
Thanks. And if you would just remain up here, John, that would be great. So thanks, Father John. Each year the Ford program bestows the Notre Dame Award for International Human Development and Solidarity. And in giving this award, the Ford program both celebrates the leadership and the dedication of the awardee. But it also calls attention to the challenges that people in many parts of the world continue to face, development challenges. This year, we're honored to bestow the award on Jacqueline Novogratz. After going to work for Chase Manhattan Bank after college, Jacqueline yearned for more meaning and more purpose in her life. Her life's journey has taken her around the globe in efforts to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. She worked with the World Bank and she worked with UNICEF in search of solutions to the problems of extreme poverty. And eventually, she founded Acumen in 2001. Through investments of patience, Acumen has touched tens of millions of lives and helped people to lift themselves out of poverty. Jacqueline herself has demonstrated great courage, creativity, humility, persistence, and patience. These are values that are at the heart of Notre Dame's mission. So therefore, for promoting a deeper awareness of the challenges faced by the world's poor, for showing that there can be no truly human development without respect for human dignity and human ingenuity, for demonstrating to others that it is possible to overcome dire human development challenges, and for channeling investments that make a reality, innovative ideas that serve the common good. It's a great honor for the University of Notre Dame, through the Ford Family Program in Human Development Studies and Solidarity, to present the 2013 Notre Dame Award for International Human Development and Solidarity to Jacqueline Novogratz. Jacqueline.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wow. Before I even started, I feel like going into the corner and weeping. In great truth, coming to Notre Dame for the second time has just been remarkable in that I've been here a few hours only thus far, and have been struck again by the kindness and the openness of the people that I've encountered, both within this small circle as well as just on the street. And second of all, after having gone to this very intimate mass that Father Bob led so beautifully, in which he talked about persistence and the courage that comes from love, and just really touched me in extraordinary ways. So I would also love to thank Notre Dame, thank the Ford family and the Kellogg Institute. Paolo, thank you for your leadership. Father John, it is wonderful to see you. I couldn't feel more honored to be an honorary Notre Dame graduate. My dad was a big football player at West Point. He played here twice, and as a daughter of Catholic immigrants, Notre Dame stands mythic in my family. So it's really exciting to be here. As for that, it's wonderful to see friends who I admire and work with, like Ray Offenheiser and Tara Kinnear. I've not seen since we were baby bankers at Chase in 1983, 100 years ago. And all of you for being here. Steve, thank you, wherever you are, for picking me up and our wonderful lunch. And also, I was thinking about this award and why did it mean so much to me, not only because of Notre Dame, because of the values of taking knowledge, turning it into action, this combination of head and heart, but also coming off the person who got it last year, Amartya Sen, who remains a giant in my life. I believe that Acumen stands on his shoulders, as we do so many shoulders of greats, not only because of his definition of freedom as development, but also in this time of such great inequality, where he talks about the unfreedoms that come with great inequality. Unfreedoms like lack of tolerance, economic exclusion, unfreedoms like just a sense of disaffection, and how we're starting to see our public services, not starting to see, our public services are really breaking down as the wealthy create private services, too often just for themselves. And then thinking about the greats here, not only Father Hesburgh, but so many of you who work for civil rights and for human rights. And we all do this work in different ways, and we stand on each other's shoulders and we stand together, but these kinds of awards are simply reminders of how we need each of us to do that work and how we cannot do it alone. And so really just want to accept it on behalf of a much, much, much larger community. And why Notre Dame for me as well is that I think we're at a moment in history where we really need a new kind of capitalism, new kinds of institutions that are grounded in the spiritual values of recognizing a sense of kinship, a sense that we need each other, and that it is a moment in history where we really have the opportunity to build and renew institutions. And so interesting to me as well that we have a pope who is unafraid to renew one of the biggest, oldest institutions on this planet, and the courage that that takes. But we're going to need a new kind of courage in all of the kinds of institutions that we are renewing. And that's really been at the heart of the work of Acumen Fund in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. Because when we started Acumen Fund 12 years ago, the world was already changing. We were already seeing, on the one hand, people yearning to connect to one another and having the tools for the first time in history to connect to one another with cell phones and other technologies. And at the same time, we were seeing a pulling back into tribe, petty, pious ideology, traditions, certainties, when in fact there is no fertile ground like uncertain ground. And that maybe we could recognize that markets, while they provided efficiencies, they are in fact a listening device to help us understand what people want when they walk with their feet, but they also exploit, they also overlook. And on the other hand, we need charity, we need philanthropy, but too often philanthropy by itself can create dependence, some of the arrogance that you talk about, Father John, which is the opposite of dignity. And that at the heart of the kind of systems we need to build as a world must lie that sense of dignity, that yearning that we all have to be seen, to be present, to be recognized, to have chances to change our own lives. And that's really why we started Acumen, to take the humanitarian impulse of philanthropy and combine it, if you will, with the efficiencies of the market and recognize the limitations of the markets as well. The good news is 12 years later, whereas some people thought we were crazy when we started, not only are we seeing that patient capital can work, and I will explain what it is, but we're starting to see all around the world a new kind of conversation where some of the business leaders of our major corporations are talking about stakeholder models, that we can no longer be building even private companies that are looking only at shareholders, but have to somehow bring in the stakeholders of people, of the environment, I would add, of society as well. And all of that is good news. So what is patient capital for Acumen? It's the heart of everything we do. It's this idea that philanthropy should be the greatest risk capital we have, and so often it's where we see people the most afraid to take real risk. Hold in, keep control. And that if we could find those entrepreneurs on the planet who were willing to use the tools of business to try to solve social problems and go into those markets where both markets and government and aid and charity had failed the poor, and seen the poor as full human beings that want to make their own decision, and give them the time to make mistakes, to fail, and ultimately, in ways I did not understand when we started, fight the status quo, fight bureaucracy, fight corruption, fight complacency, that maybe we could create these blueprints for change. that ultimately would show where markets work and where you need government to give people this access to services like healthcare, like housing, like electricity, like agricultural services. As Father John said, we've invested about $90 million in 70 companies and have seen those companies now bring services to about 115 million people, create 60,000 jobs in South Asia and Africa. But as he also said, in ways that I deeply appreciate, in many ways the work that is most important is the work that you cannot measure. And we're just now trying to understand what that actually means, because if you can't quantify or at least have a new kind of narrative, that too often gets relegated to the nice rather than to the essential. So I thought I would give just a couple of examples of stories. Well, actually, I had a whole speech here, which I've thrown away. So I'm going to give you a couple of stories that have come to mind because I have been so inspired by today and by what I've heard from Father John and from Father Bob over the last few hours. But one, I know that the Kellogg Institute is focused in Uganda, but closer to Kampala. I want to tell a story about Gulu, which is up in northern Uganda. And this is a part of the world which, until 2007, was known as one of the most dangerous places on the planet. It's the place where Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army came in and would go into a village and burn it down and kill the men and take the boys and the girls and the women into slavery and into forced conscription for 24 years. You saw this whole part of the world devoid of people. People were moved into these IDP camps, internally displaced persons camps. And it was only in 2007 when the area was made safe. And these 1.4 million people came back into the area. And for the first couple of years, a lot of wonderful aid organizations, emergency organizations, NGOs, missionary groups came to help the people there. But many of them have already left. They can't sustain. And so enter into this scene a wonderful entrepreneur, South African named Bruce Robertson, who's a friend. And we were having a conversation because he's also a cotton ginner who happened to have been doing cotton ginning in eastern Uganda for 20 years. And so asked what it would take to get him to go to Gulu. And so, of course, nobody would want to invest in this particular environment that was unsafe with unskilled people who had no skills, who had no implements, and who had no income to buy the goods that were being sold. And so we and another group called Root Capital provided him with upfront money, cash, so that he could buy and he train and then buy cotton from these farmers that had never farmed, sometimes in their entire lives. By giving him the capital and helping to build a company, he was able to access significant grant money from institutions that let him provide training to the farmers not only in cotton, but then increasingly in sesame. And he realized very quickly that organics would allow them a 15 to 25% additional margin. So he was essentially training them in things that they could use even if the company somehow went away. The good news is it has not gone away, and today there are about 50,000 farmers who are producing 8% of Uganda's cotton now in this area. And if you ever need a modern day example of resurrection and rebirth, it is in Gulu. When you go, I was just there a week ago, to see these extraordinary fields that are full of farmers, like this one named George William, who came back with the shirt on his back and his 5 kids, and now not just has a mud house, but an adobe house and an ox plow and 4 acres and a motorcycle, because he's also now an agent for other farmers, and all of his children go to private school. That's really the promise. But Bruce does more than that, even though this is an important company, employs 600 people as well, is bringing $8 to $10 million into the economy every year. Bruce also has a commitment to doing what's right, not what's easy, and recognizes that it's important to build an all-Ugandan team. Now, if any of you have worked in the agricultural business, particularly in Africa, it's an all-cash business. That's going to change with cell phones really fast, which is really good news. But because it's an all-cash business, trust is really important, and no one trusts anybody because the farmers only go with commodity prices, and the guys that run it are walking around with cash. So you might trust your brothers and sisters or your clan, or more likely, you import managers from other countries. And when those managers come in, you take their passports, and then they in turn treat the black farmers in Uganda or elsewhere, let's just say without a lot of dignity. And so what Bruce has done is deliberately traded off efficiency to build an all-Ugandan team. They've worked with him for 20 years. And when I was just there a week ago and I talked to Gertrude, who's the head of finance, this woman is entrusted with $50,000 in cash during the buying season, and never is a penny lost. She would do anything for Bruce because she knows that she and all of her cohort are role models now of what it takes to actually build an all-Ugandan company to solve an all-Ugandan problem for Ugandan farmers. That's the promise, but it means we need new mechanisms to understand that we are deliberately making these trade-offs in the short term so that we can have true long-term sustainability, true long-term productivity in ways that aren't always easy to measure. The second example I want to give, because I think that we talk too easily about the mechanisms, but underneath them is this idea of moral leadership, a new kind of leader that's needed to navigate this complex world in which we live, that can really hold tensions, values in tension. And they exist in every country, through every religion, every ethnicity, every class. And this is a young man named Javad Aslam. He was born in Baltimore, actually, Pakistani-American, working in commercial real estate. And after 9/11, he called me out of the blue because he wanted to go back, he wanted to go to Pakistan, the land of his forebears, and make some kind of difference. Didn't really know how to do it. We'd been working in housing with this old hand named Tasneem Siddiqui, and we suggested that he go, he'd learn, he'd listen as an apprentice. And he did that. And then we gave him patient capital to create the first low-income housing outside of Lahore. And it took him a long time to do it. Again, this was a man who would do what is right, not what's easy. Refused to pay any bribe. It took him a year and a half just to register the land with one registrar. And I was often asked during that time when I would give speeches in Pakistan to say, we're working on this housing, but we can't get registration for this land because we've got this 31-year-old registrar who won't register it without a bribe. This group of feisty young Pakistani business school students said, Ms. Novogratz, do you think it's more unethical for him not to pay the $200 bribe and make the poor wait? Or do you think it's more unethical for him to pay the bribe and let the poor have the housing they deserve? 30 years of doing this work has taught me that the people who pay the price of corruption are not the rich. In all of Pakistan's history, there had never been a mortgage made to a low-income person. So from my perspective, 18 months to do it the right way, not the easy way, was the right thing to do. And that was Javad's perspective as well. But it means that we hold this idea of ethics, understanding who actually gets excluded from the kind of corruption that we too often see in the world. And today, not only do we have a community of 2,000 people that are thriving outside of Lahore, but nobody goes after Javad looking for a bribe. He's known for being one of the most honest businessmen in a very difficult and a very corrupt industry. But it doesn't mean he's all soft. It doesn't mean he's all heart. And in fact, for these kinds of enterprises to be effective, they have to sustain themselves. Because if you don't have sustainability, and in many cases with our company's profitability, you don't have impact. And so when Javad made this community happen with the people there, he essentially made a covenant with them, created a sense of belonging, a sense of possibility, but a sense of accountability as well. And the deal was, if you didn't pay your mortgage for 3 months, you faced eviction. And so, of course, in low-trust communities, which is all the communities in which we work, people are going to test your resolve. and over and over and over. We thought we were done with that early stage, but just a few months it happened again. 7 families stopped paying. And after the first 3 months, Javad sent his guys to tell them that these families faced eviction. And they said, we'll pay, we'll pay, we'll pay. Month 5, month 6 go by. And so suddenly, unfortunately, we had just sent an Acumen Fund fellow there to work in this company, a big superstar at Google and Apple, thinking he was going to work with poor people, which he was. And in his first week, Javad explained the situation to him and said, get in the car, along with these 2 big Punjabi repo men and wire cutters. And Abbas, the Acumen fellow, said, I thought I was helping the poor, now I was going to evict them from their houses. And so they went to the community together, and indeed, the big Punjabi guard went up to the first house and clipped the lock and pulled the bed out of the house and put it on the flatbed of the truck. And then all the neighbors rushed in and said, no, we will guarantee that the families pay their mortgages and we will help them do it. And on the spot, they renegotiated the mortgage. And so it's this idea that the leaders of today need to have muscles of softness, of inclusion, of kinship, and in that softness and inclusion and kinship, have the grit and the fortitude to take each other seriously and to see the poor not with pious pity, but as full-bodied human beings, as part of that promise, that covenant that we need to create for each other. It's why the journey can be so difficult. And then the final story with Javad, which is so important, is that people now call me all the time and say, we want to do housing as well in Pakistan. But what they think that they're building are bricks and mortar. What they don't realize is that Javad built community. He didn't just build housing. And so this is a very diverse community, as are all of our urban centers now. And I don't know if you've been keeping up with the news of Pakistan, but over the last few years there have been untold numbers of killings in the major cities, Karachi and Lahore especially, not just Sunni Shia, but within Sunni Islamic sects. And so the diversity at Saiban is just as great, and yet there's only one mosque. It took this community a year to navigate who would use the mosque. And finally, Javad, with a lot of toughness, negotiated with the elders of the community, and they decided that they only had one mosque. They would find a way to share it, and so they would elect the 3 most respected imams from different sects. And those imams would take turns praying at Friday prayer, and the entire community would pray behind them. And this is unprecedented in Pakistan. And it's a reminder to me that sometimes the most radical thing you can do in a cynical world is create hope. That's what we need from our leaders today, and that's the promise. While the work is difficult and long, we are starting to see enormous results that provide a real pathway, I believe, to change. We invested in 2 young men from Stanford when they wanted to bring a solar light as a replacement for kerosene. And today, D-Light is selling 500,000 units every month in Africa. Over 22 million people now have light because of that one company, which we hope will become profitable soon, really soon. We invested in these crazy idealistic entrepreneurs that decided to take on the ambulance industry in India, which is also bloated and corrupt. They had 9 ambulances, and today they have 1,200 ambulances, 6,000 employees, have taken 2 million people to hospital, and are really the model for how we deliver emergency services with an ethos of service for all. In Ghana, we're invested in what has become the largest rice producer, in 2 entrepreneurs who refused to play the game of the land grab and understood the power of smallholders as well as importing large-scale Brazilian technology. And this idea that we can start to see innovation around the world happen has just been extraordinary on every level. But again, it means combining the hard and the soft, recognizing the use of a different kind of capital and measuring our returns, not just in the finances that come back, and some do come back, but also the change that we see made in the world. I thought I would tell a story to end, which is really a story about what actually happens to the customers when this is done right, when the entrepreneurs have the guts and the determination to really stay in community, understand who their customers ultimately are. I mentioned the story of D-Light, which is this solar company that's now gone wild and really created a new industry. But there was, in Kenya, a new distributor, because as the companies grow, we go from young people with all this idealism and desire to create a company, often to bringing in second career people leaving their corporate lives to actually help scale these companies. And because D-Light's grown so fast in Africa, their director of African distribution is a man named John Small. He's ironically named because he's actually an enormous man from Australia with a shock of white hair and a personality to match. And he asked me if I would go visit one of the customers, and so we went to see a number of them, and I was particularly struck by this old woman named Teresia, a granny, a single mother, who was the mother of a single mother, and her daughter worked as a day laborer, making about $1 a day, and Teresia and the daughter and the 1-year-old grandson lived off of that income. We went to go visit Teresia in her little mud house, which is pretty much like any shack that you see in many of these rural areas in which we work, where it feels like nighttime in the middle of the day. And she proudly showed us her $30 D-Light. Now, the cheapest one is $8, and one of the real highlights for us has been to see that once people convert to solar, which is a really difficult conversion, they immediately want to go upstream to charge their cell phone, usually, and then they want electricity. So we're learning a ton with the market as a listening device. And so I was really surprised when I saw this old woman with a $30 lamp when she makes $1 a day, trying to make the math work. And but she sells cell phone charging as her second or probably 17th business, which is how many of these women survive. And so I asked Teresia if she liked the light. She said she loved the light. But having been working in Africa and South Asia for 30 years, I was used to people saying, "We love this, thank you very much." But then I asked her if she would talk to David about how to improve the light. And so often when you give people things, they tell you whatever you gave them is very, very nice, even if they end up throwing it away as soon as you walk out the door. But in this case, she said, well, actually, if I could charge my cell phone at the same time that I charged the light, it would really make me happy. And I thought, wow, that's really exciting to see this woman actually speak the truth to this man who's asking her this question. And then she said, and second, and went on to give him 4 different product improvement opportunities that he should take on. And I thought to myself as I was watching this little woman talk to this big man with such confidence that this is why I started Acumen in the first place. Because she was neither pandering nor begging, but speaking to him as an equal, as a customer who had earned his respect and trust. And he was not standing there with a false sense of arrogance nor benevolence, but he was there trying to earn her trust, speaking to her as an equal. And in this exchange was the opportunity for transformation, was the opportunity for dignity. And it was the reminder of why this work matters. But it's not just what the work is, it's how the work is done. And knowing how hard it is, and knowing that we have to make these kinds of trade-offs, knowing when to evict, knowing when to love and stand by, knowing when to fight corruption, understanding what the status quo is, coming at it from a place of kinship, we decided that we needed to write a manifesto. Because it's really hard. No, there are no rule books for this kind of work. And I would say that whether you're working at the biggest corporation or in the church or in the social enterprises, there are no longer any rule books. Everything is different in a networked, interconnected world. Let me just say that this manifesto of ours is aspirational. It is really hard to live up to, and I fail it probably daily. But I have also found that it is a moral compass for me and for us. And there are many times when I'm in negotiations or trying to help an entrepreneur that I think about these words. And so if you would indulge me, I will read it to you. It starts by standing with the poor, listening to voices unheard, and recognizing potential where others see despair. It demands investing as a means, not an end, daring to go where markets are broken and aid has failed. It makes capital work for us, not control us. It thrives on moral imagination, the humility to see the world as it is, and the audacity to imagine the world as it could be. It's having the ambition to learn at the edge, the wisdom to admit failure, and the courage to start again. It requires patience and kindness, resilience and grit, a hard-edged hope. It's leadership that rejects complacency, breaks through bureaucracy, challenges corruption, and does what's right, not what's easy. It's the radical idea of creating hope in a cynical world, changing the way the world tackles poverty, and building a world based on dignity. Martin Luther King talks about love and power, saying that love without power is anemic and sentimental, and that power without love is reckless and abusive. And in this moment of such great inequality, where we have every opportunity to use the resources, the tools, the great generation that's coming up with its sense of idealism and possibility at our disposal, we have no excuse but to take on these issues together from that sense of kinship, from that sense of understanding that we need to hold the head, the soft and the hard, the head and the heart. And it is in that kind of focus on moral imagination combined with a new kind of market orientation that I believe we have hope to really deal with the sense of material and spiritual impoverishment that has too often plagued the many of us. And so to bring it back here to Notre Dame, I feel there are few institutions so well suited, frankly, on the planet, who have the skills and the tools and the sense of moral grounding and possibility that allows us to transcend and to live in the material world, which has never needed that kind of transcendence more than it does today. And so I say thank you again to the Ford family and Kellogg, and mostly to you and to Notre Dame.
You can all see immediately why we have been so enthusiastic about this prize and this awardee, not merely because Jacqueline and Acumen represent a successful model of development with results that can be shown, certainly that, but that to get there, really what they illustrate is something that is at the heart of what the Ford Family Program is about, what the Kellogg Institute is about in talking about integral human development, what Notre Dame is about as an educational institution. And that is that human development is ultimately first about the generation of a new human subject, a truly human subject. And everything else follows only after that and from that. And we couldn't have a more concrete and clear example of that before us.